So I'm a female. I'm 23 years old now, and the story was when I was 21 with a 4-month-old baby. He's mine, and he's 2 years old now. I'm about 5'9", a bit overweight, and I have social anxiety around new people. I went with my sister, who's about 26 years old and around 5 feet tall, to her work, as she worked at a very nice restaurant in a shopping center. We went straight there for her 6 p.m. start after being in the city all day long collecting money for a cat rescue. I was just chilling out, eating good food and binging on Reddit when I decided I wanted to smoke. So I pack up the kidlet and let my sister know I'm going out to the car park to have a smoke as she passes through the dining area. The car park was about 70 meters away from the restaurant. It had really good lighting, and because it was so late, I could hang around near the doors. This is where it gets creepy. The security guard was doing his rounds, about my height, and Indian. He decides to check on me. That's cool, man. I'm just having a smoke. The conversation went something like this.
Hey, how are you doing? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Just waiting for my sister to get off work.
Very good. It's a very cute baby. I have 4 at home. You got a husband?
I told him that I have a fiance, which was a complete lie. I was 100% single at the time, but he was already making me pretty anxious.
You know, I could be husband. I look after baby for you. I look after you.
No thanks. I'm sure your wife wouldn't appreciate that.
No, wife love baby. Wife will love you too. You come home with me?
I finish my smoke and decide this is when I need to get away. He then follows me inside, and I go around the mostly closed shopping center hoping to lose him in Kohl's. I actually lost him for about 5 seconds, but Kohl's had just shut down for the night, and the only place left open was my sister's work. So I went back there, even though I didn't want him to know where I was at. Right as I was about to walk into the restaurant, I then saw him coming up the escalator, and he was still watching me. I take the last 2 steps towards the hostess, who happened to be the owner's daughter, and told her what was going on. At this point, the security guard is standing right in front of the restaurant, still just staring at me. The hostess takes me to a semi-secluded booth and goes to talk to her dad about the whole situation. As she's gone, well, the creepy security guard came into the dining area, searched for me, and then came and sat right in my booth, way too close to me and my child.
How old are you? I want to ravish you, pretty woman. You be mother to my babies. We make cute babies.
At this point, it was very clear that I was super uncomfortable, but he still made it worse.
Don't worry, I security. I protect you and baby.
He's reaching across the table with one hand now. I'm frozen. I don't care about the hand near me, but I'm watching for the other one. I'm not gonna let anyone touch my baby. I'm about to snap, go full mama bear mode, when then the owner of the restaurant steps in and asking if there's a problem. English is not his native language, but he gets the point across.
No problem. Just talking to my lovely lady.
This is a customer. Has she done something wrong?
No, never. She my lady. We're going to get married.
Then the weird security guard does this really creepy grin. It was like he was silently warning me to play along. Finding some comfort in the restaurant owner's presence, I just want this man to leave me alone so I can eat my dinner.
Haha, funny lady. See? We joke.
I don't know this man. Please get him to leave me alone. The restaurant owner then chimes in again. She wants you to leave now. Get out of here.
No, she just messing around. She love me. I be waiting for you, my pretty lady.
He eventually leaves after that. The restaurant owner makes sure that I'm okay and moves me to the employee break room and eventually tells my sister everything that happened. 2 hours later, and my sister had finished her shift, we pack up and head to the car. Security guard appears out of nowhere, and he was actually waiting for me.
I take pretty lady and baby home now. Come on, pretty lady. We go home.
Just like a guardian angel, the restaurant owner steps right out from his car right behind the security guard. "She's going home with her sister, and you're gonna leave her alone."
"No, pretty lady mine. She come home with me."
Right after that, the restaurant owner just looks at us and tells us to get in the car and that he's gonna take care of this. We get in the car and then head right home. I found out the next day from my sister that her boss had actually physically restrained the security guard because he went to grab my arm as I was getting in the car, and then he got him fired and permanently banned from ever going to that shopping center ever again. This is by far one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me in my life. I really hope I never encounter that security guard ever again anywhere else. This happened a long time ago in my early 20s. My friend and I went into JCPenney's for her to exchange a package of onesies for her infant daughter. Both of us had our toddlers with us, sitting and facing each other in a stroller. After being in the store for a few minutes, they both started tugging back and forth on one of the packages of the onesies. I grabbed the package from them and threw it into the compartment under the stroller, ending their game of tug-of-war. My friend did a little more shopping, and the boys did some more fighting and whining. She exchanged the onesies and then cashed out the rest of her items. We left that store, got lunch in the food court, let the babies play in the play place, and grabbed some coffee, ready to head out. As we received our coffees, a security officer approaches me and asks me what I stole. Now, completely dumbfounded, I tell him I didn't steal anything. He tells me that he has me on video stealing, and if I confess, he'll go easy on me. I tell him he's wrong and he can even check my purse, as I have nothing on me. He then immediately pulls the package of onesies from the bottom of the stroller. Amidst our toddler screaming, I guess she didn't realize that I put them down there, so she grabbed another package. I didn't pay attention because she had bought some other things, and I was trying to keep the boys from poking each other in the eyes. You know how it is. Toddlers can be a real pain. I then tell the security guard it was absolutely not intentional and explain how the boys were grabbing on it, to which then led to my throwing it to the bottom of the stroller. He goes on a rant on how he's heard every excuse in the book and I'm just making it worse for myself. So I bring up the timeline and then ask, if I honestly intended to steal, why would I stay for lunch, let the kids play, and then calmly sit down to have my coffee? My friend also confirms that she has the infant daughter, and yes, the boys were annoying each other during our shopping trip. Now, this apparently pissed off the security guard, because he then went into full-on commando mode, pulling me by the arm back to JCPenney's and right into the security room. We get inside the security room and I urge him to watch the security tape yet again, figuring he'll see the babies fussing and understand the confusion. Now, he leaves me in the room for 45 minutes, to which I figured he had seen the babies fussing and fighting. Well, nope. He comes back in and calls me a liar. He says that it very clearly showed me shoplifting and he's going to call the cops now. I'm absolutely frustrated, but agree to the cops being called because I figured that they'll see the tapes and understand the mistake. Well, he didn't like this either. He tells me that once the cops get involved, he's required to call Child Protective Services as well, which will immediately open a case, and that they're probably going to take my son in custody until I have a court date. Now, keep in mind, I'm only 23 years old at the time, and I've never been in a situation like this before in my life, so stupid me believed his lying ass. I break down crying, telling the guy that I'm being honest and that I'm not a thief and that I have a clean record. Why would I even steal clothes for a child that isn't even mine? He was absolutely cold. He went on to tell me that the most innocent-looking people are usually the ones who steal, and that he's heard every excuse and lie that you could possibly think of. I have about 3 minutes to confess before he calls the cops and has my son taken away from me. I still insisted my innocence because, well, I was. I also began to beg for a manager. Crazy security guard then leaves and comes back about 10 minutes later. No manager, but with a paper which is basically a generic written confession saying that I shoplifted in the amount of $6.99. and it said that I agreed to pay restocking fees, loss and prevention fees, and to not enter the store for 3 years. Now I'm hysterically crying, pleading with him that I did nothing wrong. I'm not a shoplifter. The only thing I did was exercise poor judgment by not specifying to my friend that the onesies were on the bottom. He tells me he has no sympathy for thieves and liars, and that he's already called the cops, and that they're on their way to arrest me and take away my son. That is, unless I sign the paper. So I panic. I quickly sign the form, to which he then releases me. I tell my friend who drove us there to hightail it out of the mall ASAP. After telling her the story in the car and other people later, I come to find out that the entire thing was complete bullcrap. The security guard totally lied and manipulated me, and he should have lost his job for that. But he was so far in my head that I just didn't want to revisit the situation, even for a second. It's been over a decade since this happened. I still get anxiety just thinking about it. I haven't seen that same security guard since that happened, but I really hope I never do. About 4 years ago, I worked as a laundress. I worked 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and would often work alone. We usually have a security guard posted near the parking lot, and later in the day they patrol the building. There was this new guy that had started, and I never saw him watching over the parking lot when I came in each morning. Throughout my shift, he would come into my laundry room, and he was very talkative. But I noticed that he would look at my body a lot when he thought I didn't notice. One day I came into work and started putting away my stuff and getting ready to begin. I hadn't turned on the lights yet, so there were parts of the room that I couldn't see. Suddenly I hear the radio static in the corner of the room, and I see a red radio light. I turn on the lights and the new guy is in the corner of the room, hiding and watching me. Whenever I asked what he was doing there, he said that he was just hanging out and then started laughing. It was obvious he was waiting for me. He ended up doing this so often that I just kinda got used to it. One day I came in early and was working in one of our smaller areas. He came into the smaller room to talk to me. Now, he's a big guy, so I wasn't really able to get around him. He was just kind of talking to me, but I couldn't move or leave the room because he was completely blocking the door. He had asked me why I came in early that day, and I told him it was because I had to leave early later on. He begins to tell me that I'm required to tell him all my hours so that he always knows where I'm at. He was leaning over me, and I felt like he was trying to upset me. I had this really horrible feeling deep in my stomach that he was about to try something. That's when I pushed past him and then called my supervisor, who said that he would keep an eye on him. I told him that I had a bad gut feeling about this guy and that I needed to leave for the rest of the day. Well, the very next day, he was fired. So, apparently he wasn't in the guard tower at the start of the shift because he would spend all of his mornings in the woods near the parking area recording girls walking in for their shifts each morning. They had also found this really huge collection of soda cans and coffee cups that was in his locker. Apparently he had dug them out from all of the various trash bins around where I and the other girls worked at. Yeah, super creepy. The last thing I remember hearing was that shortly after, his wife ended up leaving him and then took full custody of their newborn baby. Pretty crazy stuff. This happened a few months ago, and I really didn't realize just how weird it was until I told my boyfriend about it a few months later. At my college, our student IDs are pretty much essential for you to have. They get you into all the academic buildings and you get all of your food on the meal plan. I had lost mine and was forced to get a new one. I went to the security desk and told the security guard that I lost my ID and that I needed a new one made. He said,
"No problem. Just come with me while I print you a new one."
He was older. If I had to guess, I would say he was about 65, but in very good shape. Definitely over 6 foot, and you could tell that he was pretty attractive when he was younger. He had curly gray hair, very well kept, and ice blue eyes. We went to the back of the security room in the main student commons building. It was a room that was a little ways back but still had a good amount of foot traffic going by it. I walked in and sat on the couch that was across from the desk. When we walked inside, he closed the door. He went on the computer at the desk and asked me all of my information, student ID number, name, birthday, etc. When he pulled up my account, he saw my picture that is used for my ID. He asked me if I wanted to take a new picture for the new ID, and I said no, I'm good, because I really didn't like my picture being taken. But I also kind of looked a mess this day because I wasn't expecting to need a new picture taken. He then said,
"Well, your picture's pretty good. You look pretty. Most are pretty bad."
I laughed and said thank you and told him I was a senior in high school and that got taken at orientation almost 3 years ago. He then replied to me with,
"Well, you must have always been really pretty."
I started to feel a little weird then, but I mean, it's just a security officer at my college, and it's pretty well known for having great security. He then went on to say that the computer wasn't letting him print one without taking a new picture since it was so old. He told me,
"If you need to get a new ID, it makes you take a new picture after 2 years because people can change in looks, and we need to make sure it's you and have some good confirmation."
Okay, you just asked me if I wanted to take a new one, but now you're telling me I need a new one? I mean, what? I found this really weird because I thought if that was the case, he would have known that from the very beginning. But again, whatever. He's the security officer and I need to get this stupid ID. I said okay, and he said he would set up everything. He went into a closet within this security room and got out a camera on a tripod, and he told me to stand up against the wall. I did so and kind of just smiled really awkwardly. He told me that I needed to take my hair out of the bun because the hair needed to be down for the ID. Okay, but I really didn't think much of this either, as I had never seen a girl's ID without their hair down. He took a picture and then he said my eyes were closed. I kind of just laughed because my eyes are typically closed in 9 out of 10 pictures that I take. Also another reason why I didn't like my picture being taken in the first place. He told me that it was fine and that he didn't mind taking a couple. He then came over to me and he told me that my hair looked kind of awkward, so he was just going to fix it for me so I looked better for the picture. He then started fixing my hair and that's when I pulled my head back and then said to him, "It's good. I don't really care. No one looks at it anyways." He rolled his eyes at me and then said,
"Whatever. It's your picture, but it would look a lot better if I fixed it."
Again, I told him that it was fine and not to worry. Just trying to be polite. After the next picture, I saw the clock on the wall and realized I had only 10 minutes before class started. I told him to just use whichever picture didn't have my eyes closed because I have class in about 10 minutes, so I kind of have to go. He replied back,
"Look, your professor isn't going to get mad at you if you say you were getting an ID from security and it just took a while."
At this point, I realized I had been in there for over 20 minutes, and I wasn't nervous but more so sick of just being there, and I just really wanted out already. He then told me that the pictures just take a few minutes to print and to just wait on the couch or something. He then started talking to me and asking me what my major is, if I have a boyfriend, and he asked how long we had been dating, and also said something like,
"Oh, you know guys in college are no good. They will just waste your time. You should just break up with him and find someone older and more mature."
Yeah, dude, whatever. Just give me my ID already. I didn't really respond to that and kinda just said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go because I really can't be late for class. Can I just pick this up at the desk after class?" The security guard then huffed and then said to me,
"What a rush you're in, but it should be ready now, just hold on."
He then went from the desk to the back of the room where the printer was and finally grabbed my ID.
"Wow, the picture is even better. I'm a pretty good photographer if I do say so myself,"
he said, and then he did this really creepy wink. He kept holding the ID and not handing it to me. I was getting really annoyed at this point, but I'm really bad at being assertive. "Look, I'm sorry, but I really have to go now." He then laughed at me and then said,
Okay. I would think a senior wouldn't be so nervous about being a little late.
then finally handed me the ID. I basically snatched the ID right out of his hands, and he then said,
"Well, I'll walk you out because you aren't supposed to be back here without a security guard. I wouldn't want you getting in trouble."
I'm thinking to myself, oh my god, dude, just let me go already. Let me get out of here. So he walked me out and I said thank you and basically just ran right out of the building. I'm not going to lie, I thought he was pretty weird and flirty, but I had never needed to get an ID made before, so I just thought that's how the process was and that he was just being a little too flirty with the situation. So I never really said anything to anyone. With about 3 weeks left of school, I somehow managed to lose my ID yet again. I had been borrowing my boyfriend's because I was super busy at the end of the year and just thought, I really don't have a half hour to spare to go get another ID. Finally, my boyfriend got pretty annoyed with me using his meal plan and having his ID, and he then said, "You really need to go get a new one. It only takes about 5 minutes tops." I said, "No it doesn't. It took half an hour and I don't have time for that." He asked me what the heck I was talking about, and I told him the whole story about the security guard. My boyfriend began to tell me that that's absolutely not okay and I needed to report it immediately. I told him that I didn't care enough to go through all that, but I asked him to come with me to get a new ID. When I went to go get a new one, this time it was a different security guard, and he said, "Yeah, no problem. Just wait right here, I'll be back in a minute." Not even 5 minutes later, he came right back with a new one. I told him what had happened last time with the other security guard, and he looked very concerned about it. He asked me who the security guard was. I didn't know his name, but I described him. He gave me the name and office of the head security guard and told him that he would call and tell them that I was coming over. So I went and talked to the head security officer and he told me that what happened was not at all protocol, and when he looked in the system, he saw over 30 pictures of me taken. He then reported it to the higher-ups. I had to go in and speak to a group of 3 people in administration, and they let me know that he was fired and would not be allowed on campus ever again. They also told me to notify them if I happened to see him. Now, I know it doesn't sound that crazy like most of the stories you hear, and I'll be honest, I didn't really feel like I was in any danger, but honestly, I think I was just too naive to feel that at the time. I've always trusted every security guard, but I have no idea what his intentions were. Why did he take over 30 pictures of me? I just don't know, and honestly, I don't know if I even want to know. The building that I used to work in had 2 security guards. There was a harmless old guy, and also a younger guy my age, who was not so harmless. Over time though, he became very friendly towards me. He had asked me on a date and I said yes. I had already mentioned that I was moving out of country very soon, so obviously nothing will come of it, but hey, if he wants to buy me dinner, why not? Mistake 1 was giving him my address to come pick me up. I mean, he's security at work and I'm leaving the country pretty soon, so it seemed a small risk. I had told my office mates and I agreed to dinner with them. I mean, what's the worst that can really happen anyways? He arrives on time with 24 roses. He then tells me that he's bought a brand new suit and he also had his car detailed for the occasion. I thought that was a bit much, but so far he seems pretty nice and harmless. I thanked him and I told him that I forgot something and that I'd be right back. I wasn't about to let this guy put the roses in water. We get to dinner and it's this very nice restaurant. We've not even had our drink order taken yet and he drops this on me. He tells me that he's a 27-year-old virgin who's never kissed anyone, and this is his first date and he's super nervous. Oh crap. Really, dude? You know who's also really nervous? This chick right here. What the heck am I supposed to do with that nugget of info, dude? So yeah, dinner was pretty awkward. I really did my best to be polite and kind, but it just got weirder from there. At the end of the night, he lunged for my face and stuck his tongue deep in and out of my mouth. I was totally not expecting that, but hey, he's now kissed a real live girl and had his first date, so good for him. Really not looking forward to breaking it to him later that I'm not interested and also moving, but why rain on his parade right then? Before I could break it to him, it got weird. Like,
how dare you not return my call the next day, or the day after?
Not that it's his business or anything, but I spent that Saturday and Sunday visiting my family. I came home to a full box of voice messages, the last of which were very angry. When I got to work on Monday, I found a lovely letter on my desk. Jesus. The letter basically said that he knew where I lived, what car I drove, and some other info showing that he had been taking notes of my coming and going. Why wasn't I home that weekend? Whoa, this was so creepy. This is why you're single. It's not because you're a virgin, it's because you're a creep. He got pretty angry and stalkery. I'd see him out when I wasn't working. At this point, I said screw it, gave early notice, and got the heck out of there ASAP. I really wish I could tell you moving country was enough, but nope. The guy actually managed to find me online. Now, I don't use my real name because of work, and he proceeded to harass me online, and he followed my friends in order to find me. Dude, you're so going to die a virgin. I used to feel sorry for you, but what the heck? Yeah, so I have no intention on ever speaking to him or seeing him ever again. So, I'm not the best at writing and describing things, but something happened to me about 3 days ago. It's been on my mind non-stop. I've had a lot of nightmares over it. I'm going away for about 5 months this summer to work in Greece. Same thing I did last year. Anyway, this time it's not such a last-minute decision, so I planned ahead to take a few family members away on a low-budget British caravan holiday so that we could spend time together before I leave. I booked it for a week, Friday to Friday. The first few days were good, celebrating Wales winning the Grand Slam in the rugby. Monday was pretty much the same. We played bingo on the on-site clubhouse, and this is when I noticed a member of their security team. He looked pretty attractive at a distance. I like beards and glasses, so I said to my mother, "Oh, he's nice," and we kinda just laughed about it. A little while later, he approached our table and chatted to us a little bit about general things going on site in his job. He shook my hand and introduced himself. He then stood by our table on and off all night trying to engage in general conversation. He made excessively eye contact with me, which was kind of weird, so I thought that's why I was getting such bad anxiety being around him, cause otherwise he seemed pretty normal. When we were leaving, he was on duty at the front of the clubhouse that we walked past, and I told him bye. He said something along the lines of,
"Aw, don't go. I've got 2 days off and I won't be able to see you."
Which I thought was pretty weird cause we just met him and had nothing but really just basic conversation. My mom thought that I liked him, so she said that she was going to catch up with my dad and left me alone to talk with him. He looked like he was going to say something, but I wasn't really interested in being alone with him, so I just said, "I can't believe she left me behind. See you later," and then I left. I could feel him watching me walk through this dark car park. Again, so much anxiety. A couple of days went by and things were pretty normal, but on the day he came back on duty, which was a Wednesday, he noticed us right away and walked right over, winked at me, and stood right next to me, and then put his elbows on the table and was trying to chat with me again, way too close to my face. I shrugged it off and went to go play with my nephew who was in the arcade bowling machine. I remember seeing him in the corner of my eye, watching me from behind one of the machines, and again, I got really bad anxiety. I went back to my parents' table and he would walk by every few minutes looking each time. I couldn't stand the anxiety that I was feeling in my gut, so I waited until he was gone out of sight, made an excuse, and went back to the caravan alone. My parents arrived back a few hours later and told me that he kept stopping by and asking about me, and also asking where I was and if he needed to check up on me, and that he also gave my mother a piece of paper with his phone number on it to give to me. I was so embarrassed by that and actually joked with my mother about it. I mean, who tries to get someone's mom to be their wing woman? I mean, come on. Thursday was our last day. I decided not to go out because I felt really uncomfortable going there now after being watched and throwing his number away in the bin. My parents went somewhere else and I decided to just stay in. I was a bit of a panic and I was babysitting my nephew. This is where things took a turn and I got really freaked out. He began sending me messages on WhatsApp. I replied at first, just wanting to be polite. I also mentioned packing and going home. He started to get a little flirty with me, so I put my phone on silent and went to bed. My mom had left her window and curtain wide open. My dad had fallen asleep on the couch watching TV with my nephew, and I was in the single room by myself. I woke up a little later because I heard a rustling noise right outside. I froze for about a second, but I could hear movement right outside my window. When I looked through a tiny gap, I saw him standing there looking around, and I genuinely thought that I was going to have a heart attack right then and there. I've never been so paralyzed with fear before in my life. I felt like I needed to cough, but I was so terrified to make a sound. I looked at my phone and it was about 3:30. I saw that there was a bunch of WhatsApp notifications and I was way too scared to open them, so I read some of them from the notifications. He told me that he knew where I was and he wanted me to dangle myself outside of the window for him to play with, along with sending nude pictures, numerous calls and texts, all while outside my window. All I did was lay there for about 2 hours, way too afraid to even move. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I remember was my mom waking me up saying that she had just opened the curtains in the living room and saw him standing right outside. I'd also like to add that this was at 9 a.m., 6 hours later. Again, I've never been so scared in my life. We were finally packed and ready to leave and get the heck out of here. By the time we were about to go, he had finally left. I ran to the car with my hood up, absolutely paranoid that he would stop us. My parents thought it was really weird of him being out there, but I never told them about all of the messages, so they don't really know why I was being so weird. I felt really sick waiting for my dad to start the engine because I don't know where he had gone or if he was still watching. If he had found out my number in Caravan and had seen us in my dad's car with the license plate, I mean, what else could he find out? I haven't really mentioned this story to anyone else because, to be honest, I can't really handle it right now. I feel so violated in every way, and I don't know how to describe it. I sincerely hope that I never meet that man ever again. So, I used to be a security officer at a homeless shelter earlier this year. I worked there for about 5 months before leaving. So back in March, I was at work doing what I needed to do. On the ground floor was a daytime-only homeless shelter, and on the top was a government homeless outreach office. This is who my contract was through, but I had to keep the entire building secure even though the shelter was a different organization. The government office was the mental health branch, so it wasn't uncommon for crazy people to, well, you know, act crazy. This particular day, an individual came up to pick up his medication. The man took the medication and walked over to the couch that sits in the office. After sitting down, the guy starts digging through his backpack and pulls out a big bag full of white pills. This immediately catches my attention. He grabs his pocket knife and smashed about 3 or 4 pills, uses his hands to make the dust into about 3 lines, and then snorts all of the dust up. What remained left, he just swept and flung it off the table. This is now considered to be acting hostile and potentially illegal. So I walk over and start trying to ask the man to leave. He keeps telling me,
I gotta take my meds.
I inform him that he needs to leave some more, and then he says out loud without even looking at me,
You know, I got a suppressed 9mm right in my bag that'll make you shut up.
Alarm bells start ringing. I now have a potentially active shooter scenario right in my hands, and I'm an unarmed officer. I calmly walk backwards to the receptionist and whisper to her to go get the other client up, call 911, and lock herself in the exam room, and do not open the door. She does this as well as inform all of the other caseworkers of the situation, and they all lock and barricade all of the doors. They had cameras in the lobby, so all of this was recorded and then turned over to the police. After many other attempts to get the man to leave and then informing him that the police were on their way and en route, he gets up, gets in my face, and then tells me quietly,
"I'm coming back for you one day,"
and storms out. The police arrive 5 minutes later and they examine the footage, put out an APB on the man, and take samples of the powder that he left on the table. A few days later, I'm informed that the man was now found but with no guns and no drugs, and the powder turned out to be some antipsychotic medication. He claimed that he just lost the bottle that they came in. Now, nothing bad really happened, but still, as a 19-year-old unarmed security guard, this scared the crap out of me. For all of those curious, I still work for the same company, but I work on third shift in a completely different location now. So to that crazy homeless guy that threatened me with a silenced 9mm, please, just stay away from me. We've lived in our neighborhood for nearly 4 years. A few houses down and across the street is a Filipino family. They're pretty nice, and whenever we see each other, we always have small talk and we know each other by name. We moved in right before I gave birth to my oldest, so they always ask for the baby and they love seeing them. We have even had meals at each other's homes before. This summer, they had an older family member, maybe 55 to 60 years old, come to visit. We noticed him right away because he would always go for long walks and lingered a lot. One evening, the mother of the family introduced him as her father. He had recently moved and would be staying with them for a while before heading north to her sister's house. He was pretty new to the US and spoke a little English, just enough to get by. He seemed nice enough, but as soon as we walked inside, I told my husband that he gave me a really weird vibe. I had never felt that way of any of the 7 other family members from the home. I've been in their home and shared meals with them. They're very sweet and welcoming. My husband also told me that he did seem a little off, but we just chalked it up to cultural differences. Fast forward about a month. My mother-in-law and my mother came to visit at the very same time. They're in the driveway with our son. I run inside because I'm pregnant and I suffer from severe morning sickness. I come back out 15 minutes later and they're having a frustrating conversation with this man. He was trying to get one of them to drive him to the store and he would use a food stamp/EBD card to buy their groceries and wanted them to give him cash. They both told him that they weren't interested, but he just kept asking and lingering. When I went outside, I called out to my husband to come out, and when he saw us, he walked away very quickly. Both of our mothers told us what had happened and how forceful that he was being with them. The next few days that I see him walking, we always wave and say simple pleasantries, but every time I would wave, he would take it as a sign to come over and try to have a conversation. I began to let him know that what he did with our mothers is very illegal and to be so forceful was really unnecessary. He said that he understood, but he would linger. It would always be at a moment where I was trying to strap my toddler to his car seat and I was rushing to get him to school. It would always take me about 10 minutes to get him to get the hint that I couldn't talk, and he would slowly walk away and just linger in our driveway. It eventually got to the point where I would watch to see if he'd walk past our house on his morning walk before venturing outside. I really just hated the awkward conversation. He would always seem to round the corner just as I finished strapping my son in the car and I was getting in. I would wave and then jump in quickly and drive off. It just felt really off, like he was waiting for me. One of our neighbors across the street one night told me that she got a weird vibe from him as well. And again, he always lingered. She told me that he did similar things with her when they were outside as well. They were opting to hang in the backyard with the kids just to avoid it altogether. Now, I usually work from home, but one day I went into the office and I was then alerted by the Ring camera. This man was standing and looking in through our kitchen window, just peering, and I could hear our pit bull barking at him. When he saw our dog, he jumped back and I used the microphone to say, "Can I help you? What do you want?" He looked absolutely shocked and then scurried away. I called my husband and I told him to play the video. We both thought it was really creepy. Whenever we saw the family walking that evening, we decided to bring it up to his daughter. She spoke to her father and he claimed that it never happened. We then showed her the video on her phone and he said that he must have gotten lost. The daughter seemed pretty annoyed by him and the entire situation. So him being weird kinda calmed down a bit. After that, I could see that his daughter was really annoyed by his behavior, and as they were walking, there was a really heated conversation. She later told me that he tends to be overly friendly and he really means no harm, but she talked to him and he would leave us alone. I asked if he had some kind of mental issue or maybe Alzheimer's since he was always getting lost. She told me no, and that he had always acted like that and that she couldn't wait until her sister was ready for him to be sent up north to her. There were a few other neighbors that had also complained to her and the homeowners association as well. Well, about 2 months later, I dropped my son off to preschool. I get home and I have to rush in because I feel really sick. Usually I leave my car door open, but something told me to lock it as soon as I got out. I did so as I was rushing inside. I would also normally leave the door unlocked if I was just going for a quick throw-up session, but again, my instincts told me to lock the bottom and top lock. When I was in the bathroom, right by the front door, throwing up my life, I then hear a rattling at the front door. Someone is turning the lock back and forth. Of course, my ring chimes and I then look at it in between heaves. What do you know? It's the old man and he's trying to get into our home. I go over to the microphone and then say, "You're at the wrong house." To which he responds with,
"Let me in, now. I want to tell you something."
Now, I kid you not, it was the best English sentence I had ever heard from someone who wasn't that good with English. I started to feel better pretty quickly and I was now on high alert. I responded with, "What do you want to tell me?" He looked right at the camera.
"Let me in your house, now!"
This is where I started to panic. He knew he was at the wrong house, but still he was continuing to try and break in. I respond, "Please get off my property. I don't feel comfortable with you here and I'm not letting you in my house." He then starts rattling at the door again really hard and tries to pull it open and then starts knocking on the bathroom window. This is where I get pissed. "Get the hell off my damn property right now. I'm not gonna let you in. If you don't get the hell out of here right now, I'm calling the cops." He then steps back, gives the camera the middle finger, and scurries off. He disappears and I run upstairs and see that he's simply walking back to his house. I let our pit bull out of our bedroom as he had been going crazy during this whole ordeal. I call my husband and he tells me to call the daughter and tell her what happened. I call her and I tell her what happened and she told me not to let him in, ever. She began to warn me that he's been very inappropriate and forceful with all of the women in her family, and she didn't want me to get hurt, especially being pregnant. She eventually comes over about an hour later and I show her the video. She's absolutely fuming over this and very apologetic, and she begs me not to call the cops. She promises me he'll be gone within the next day. The next day, he eventually flies out and his daughter told him that he's no longer welcome in her home. He now lives up north somewhere in Maryland with his other daughter and probably harassing other people as well. I honestly really don't know what would have happened if I didn't follow my instincts that day. I'm just really glad I'm okay. This story happened to me when I was in 3rd grade. I was about 8 years old at the time. My regular babysitter was ill, so my mom asked one of our neighbors who had kids and babysit a lot of the neighborhood kids if she would watch my brother and I for a few hours. We were having so much fun at Brandy's house when my mom came to pick us up. I asked if I could stay a little bit longer and finish Madagascar, as we had just started watching it. She said that it was fine, but I was to walk straight home right after. It was like maybe half a block, so not that far at all. So as the movie finishes, Brandy said that I needed to get home really fast because it was dark out. As I'm walking home, this other neighbor, Dennis, is just standing outside in his front yard. Now, I had seen Dennis around the neighborhood because his wife was very unforgettable looking. They have a daughter that was like maybe 4-ish at the time, so I didn't ever play with her or know her family outside of seeing them around the neighborhood. Dennis starts calling out to me, saying,
"Hey, what are you doing?"
"I'm just going to my parents."
"Do you want to come inside for a little bit?"
"No, that's okay. My mom told me to come straight home."
"Aw, come on. I'm sure she wouldn't mind."
No thanks."
"Come on. I have a daughter who would absolutely love to play with you. We can even make snacks."
At this point, I was just like, red flag, abort mission, and I started booking it home really fast. Then he starts following me. Not quickly, just kind of walking like Michael Myers. It was creepy. Luckily, I eventually made it home, and once he saw that I was approaching my house with my porch light on, he completely backed off. I'd like to mention that behind our houses was a giant wooded area with paths that led to a nearby lake. So, I mean, this dude could have caught me and dragged me into the woods or something. I try not to think like that, but like, what other motives could he have had, you know? Fast forward until I'm in high school and working at a restaurant in town. I see creepy Dennis and his wife all the time. As it turns out, they were secret shoppers at our restaurant. I don't think he really recognized me working there though. Anyways, I know this isn't your typical horror story of someone getting dragged into the woods, but still, as a child, this was a very creepy experience to go through. If you're a young child walking home alone, always watch your surroundings. You just never know. So, about a year ago, my apartment complex decided that they wanted to renovate my unit, so I had to move out at the end of my lease. I live in Denver and my rent is pretty ridiculous here, so I started worrying about finding something affordable in my neighborhood, which I really love. I posted on the Nextdoor app to see if anyone in my neighborhood knew of any affordable rentals in the area. I immediately got a message from someone named Joe who said that one of the condos in his complex was going to be up for rent pretty soon, and he knew the owner. He offered to get me in touch with the owner. I asked if he could send me pictures of the unit, and he asked if he could text me some pictures that his neighbor took because the chat function on the app is really slow. I now feel really stupid for doing this, but eventually gave him my phone number. I kid you not. I received a phone call from an unknown number within seconds. Now, I normally don't answer calls from unknown numbers, but I was expecting a call from a number that wasn't saved in my phone, so I answered it. I was completely bewildered when the person then said,
"Hi, it's Joe. How's your day going?"
Huh? It really took me by surprise, and I didn't really know what to say. He started to just shoot the crap on the phone, talking about how he works nights and how tired he is and how he takes care of his daughter while his girlfriend works during the day. I finally interrupted and then said, "So, about the condo?" He pretty much completely disregarded that and then said,
"I really don't think that my girlfriend would appreciate me talking to you, but I don't have to tell her, right?"
I said that I have to go and then immediately hung up the phone. And as soon as I did, he then started texting me. It was really bizarre and quite alarming to me. I blocked his number and then moments later, he found me on Facebook and sent me a friend request. Now, I'm 32 years old, but it was really creepy to me, and I even called my parents to tell them about it, and just how unnerved that it made me. And the worst part about it is that on Nextdoor, even if your exact address isn't listed, your complex is. So, I was pretty certain that I didn't have my address visible in my profile, but I checked, and sure enough, my address and unit number were totally public. Unable to really contact me in any other way, he started messaging me again on Nextdoor, asking me if I wanted to go on a walk with him. You can't really block or report people on the app, so I just decided to delete it. So one night about a month or so later, I had a knock on my door at around 10 p.m. on a weeknight. I looked out my peephole but couldn't really get a good look. I saw that it was a man who slightly had his head down. Either way, I don't answer the door for anyone that I'm not expecting, especially not a random guy at 10 o'clock at night. Feeling panicked, I decided to call my neighbor across the hall. She's an older woman and we always look out for each other since we both live alone. I asked her if it looked like he was some kind of delivery guy at the wrong door. She opened her door to try and get a good look at the guy, and that spooked him because he literally ran away. I honestly have no idea if this was the Nextdoor guy or not, but my gut tells me that it was. This was a big wake-up call. I always felt that I practiced good online safety, but I didn't even know that my address was visible on Nextdoor. I'll never be that casual or lazy about privacy settings like that ever again. I'm 28 years old, but when I was about 5 years old, my mom and I lived in this duplex that was off a main road and kind of in a wooded area. We lived on one side and the other was a woman and her son. He was studying to be a teacher. My mother had me pretty young, so she was about 25 years old and the guy was in his early 20s. He would often come and talk to my mom. My mother said that he would ask a lot of questions about me and asked my mother if it would be alright for him to take me for walks in the woods. Of course, my mother always declined. My mother worked in the operating room at the local hospital and was on call a lot, so most of the weekends I stayed at my grandma's house. One night while I was at my grandma's house, my mom was home alone, sleeping. She woke in the middle of the night and said she doesn't remember if she heard something or felt someone in the room, but she woke up. She could see feet wearing socks that were sticking out from the end of her bed. She grabbed her bedside lamp and was about to hit the intruder when our neighbor then yelled her name and then said his name. He couldn't really explain why he was naked and only wearing socks, but he begged my mother not to tell his mother about it. My mother, of course, called the cops. She ended up going to court and making a victim impact statement against this guy because she was absolutely terrified that he'd become a teacher and be around children. She says that she's pretty sure that he was there for me that night and was so happy that I wasn't there. We ended up moving pretty much immediately after that happened. She just couldn't stay another night in that house. I'm just really glad that nothing happened to me or my mother. Who really knows what would have happened if he would have succeeded in whatever he was trying to do that night. So, this happened about 4 years ago. I'm 21 years old and no longer living in the neighborhood. I saw the neighbor in question yesterday when I was visiting my parents, and that's when I remembered what had happened. A little bit of backstory. I live in a third world country. Our neighborhood is one of the worst ones, but only for outsiders. We're actually pretty friendly towards each other. Even people fresh out of jail are typically pretty friendly. We got a lot of mental cases in our neighborhood, and Happy is one of them. My mother and I call him Happy because his name literally means happy, and we always joke around saying, "Oh, Happy, are you happy?" Because he's usually always smiling. That is, unless someone angers him, which is at least 3 times a year. I lived there for about 19 years, so I know how he is. Happy lives with his 2 brothers. One sells fruits and the other is a taxi driver. Happy doesn't work because he's mentally ill. I think he has some type of schizophrenia, but I'm not really sure which one. All I know is he just doesn't really function right. You can't really hold a conversation with him on sports or the news or really anything. His sentences just never make sense. I should also say that our country doesn't really take mental illnesses very seriously. We've got like 3 psych wards in the entire country. There's just no way of treatment for him, and whatever he is, people just refer to him as crazy. It's honestly really sad. My dad was actually friends with him and his brothers. Not anymore though. My dad used to give him money from time to time so that he could buy himself smokes. My dad knew that his brother, the taxi driver, needed to support his 2 kids in another city, and the fruit seller barely sells his goods. Happy used to help carry the groceries sometimes, and Dad would give him some change for it. So since I was a kid, I only know the Happy who was very helpful and friendly, and I always smiled at him, and he would smile back at me. Well, when I turned 15 years old, he had completely changed. He still had the smile on his face, and he would stand outside in different places in the shade all day long smoking. I used to wake up at about 7 a.m. to go to school, and I would see him outside wide awake just smoking. He either didn't sleep or just woke up way too early. He would also walk some long distances as well. We would see him in a place where it takes us about half an hour to go by car, so imagine how long it took him by foot to get there. He seemed restless, but mostly he would just stand there and smoke. It ranged from early mornings to very late at nights. The behavior change became pretty creepy. He would always stare at me and have a creepy kind of forced smile on his face. If I passed by him, he would always follow me with his eyes, to the point that he would walk backwards and keep staring. I glanced a couple of times to know that he does this every time. He would also walk backwards and then put his back up against the walls like he was hiding or something. His whole demeanor just totally changed. His anger and fits also became more frequent. He would shout some cursing phrases that made no sense whatsoever and walk angrily towards his house. Now to what actually happened to me. As I said, he would always follow me with his eyes and all that. I was 17 years old, and out of any day, the day of the incident, that I happened to be home alone. I didn't go out with the family because I had to study. He probably knew that I was alone because whenever my family left, I saw through the window that he was standing in his usual spot and just staring at them while they were driving off. Lunchtime came, so I went to go buy some stuff to cook. I spotted him standing next to his brother that sells the fruit at the local market. I went to the market to buy some veggies and meat. The vegetables were pretty close to where Happy was, but the butcher was a minute walk away. As I paid the butcher for my purchase and putting it into my bag, I look up and there Happy was just staring at me. I didn't really think much of it, so I turned to the right and just kept walking towards the house, but he was right behind me yet again. I still didn't think much of it, again, because our houses are literally right next to each other. I passed his house and I was waiting to hear his footsteps to stop, but no. He was still right behind me. I look and his eyes are still on me with that really creepy smile. Still, I didn't really care because I just thought that he was going right to his spot that he usually stands at to light a cigarette or something. I never really felt like I was in any danger in my neighborhood, so I'm not really the type to get anxious easily, and especially by Happy. I never really felt that he was the dangerous type, even during his rage fits, so that's why I really had no red flags. I entered the main door from the street and walked in the wide rectangular hall that had one door where an old woman lives, passing her door and turning right to climb the stairs to get to my house that was on the 2nd floor. I heard someone enter the main door and in the hall. Again, I just thought it was one of the neighbors from the 3rd floor. The footsteps were really quick though, so I thought that one of them was in a hurry, so I turned to look at the bottom of the stairs to see who it was and make some room so that they could climb fast. To my shock, it was none other than Happy on the bottom of the stairs. I stopped dead in my tracks, and that's when my heart just started pounding really fast. I said, "Happy, what are you doing here?" With no response, he started bolting right towards me, taking 2 steps at a time. I started climbing faster too, and he caught my foot and I slipped. My right arm and knee were in so much pain from the fall. He was dragging me to the bottom of the stairs and that messed up my back as well. But with all the adrenaline pumping through my veins, I started kicking to release my ankle from his 2 hands and then screaming for him to get off. I also screamed out help, hoping one of the neighbors would hear me and come for my rescue. With my free leg, I started kicking his forearm so that he would let go, and then kept kicking and shaking the other leg free as well. With a bit of luck, I finally got free. I couldn't turn though, and I started climbing, afraid that he would follow to the house, and God only knows what he would do if he got inside. I really just wanted to kick him and hopefully make him just lose balance and fall off the stairs to give me enough time to go inside my house. I kicked and kicked, but with no luck, and screaming. It felt like forever, but it was probably about 5 seconds, and I then heard the door of the old lady downstairs begin to open. Happy heard it too, so he fled out of there. Happy passed her house, so of course she saw him, and she actually shouted at him, but he didn't listen. She was calling my name and asking if I'm okay, but I couldn't respond. She popped her head up from the bottom of the stairs, still calling my name, but all I could really do was just cry in terror and pain. My elbow was bleeding, and she started calling for my mom's name. I told her that nobody was home, so she asked me to get in her house so she could help take care of my bleeding. I told her it was okay and that I'd just do it myself, but she refused and kept calling me to go down, but eventually I just ignored her and hardly climbed those stairs and got inside. After about an hour or so, I got myself cleaned up, calmed down a bit, and cautiously went to the old lady's house. I knocked and she opened, and I asked her not to tell anything to my parents because if my dad knew, he would probably literally kill the guy. I told her that Happy was just crazy and my dad shouldn't go to jail for someone who's crazy, and he probably wasn't in his right mind. I eventually talked her into believing that he was out of his mind and that it's not that serious. She promised that she wouldn't say anything to my family, and that was that. The next 2 years, he changed again completely. This time, however, he wouldn't even look me in the eyes. If I was walking and he was walking towards me, he would literally turn around and not pass near me. The first couple of months, I was really afraid that he would be waiting around a corner or something, but turns out he just doesn't want to be seen by me. Even after me moving out and us not seeing each other whenever I visit, and to this day, 4 years later, he still doesn't want to be seen by me. So Happy, I hope you stay that way and don't hurt any other girls from the neighborhood. But what I really hope for the most is mental illness awareness in my country. I really hope that people start getting treatments and the right care. People like Happy really need it. I used to live in an apartment complex on the 1st floor. I had one person right next door named Joe, and 2 more neighbors that were adjacent. I had met my next door neighbor when he had knocked on my door as the sun was setting. He was plump, brown hair with a bowl cut, glasses, and a button-down shirt. He had told me that he had been knocking on doors and asking if someone could babysit his dog for the weekend, since he was allegedly being called away for a last-minute work trip. I agreed to watch his dog, and only thinking of possible problems that might arise with his dog, I asked for his number, simply stating, you know, just in case. That was a major mistake on my part. I didn't really realize it then, obviously. I was really just trying to be a good neighbor. We had a short conversation about my love for video games and playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it seemed like we had a lot of mutual interests. I was just being friendly, nothing more. I had my wedding ring on and made sure to brush my hand across my face to make sure that he could see it. My husband was deployed at the time. I didn't really think anything of it. Joe came back on Monday morning and I handed him his key. I hadn't asked for any money, but he offered to pay me back in another way. Apparently his office was having an escape the room event and he was allowed to bring a friend. I agreed because, why not? He seemed like a really cool person that could potentially become a new friend for me, When the day came, I wasn't really feeling very well. I was cuddling on the couch wrapped up in blankets with my sweet little cockapoo named Cortana. I was really sick and hadn't been able to make it into work that day, so I sent Joe a text letting him know that I wouldn't be able to make it to the event and to not worry about paying me back. Joe's response?
Okay.
I didn't respond. I fell asleep. I started getting text messages from him over the next several weeks, but the context didn't really add up until the very end. He had texted me asking me why I hadn't invited him to play Dungeons & Dragons. How did he know that I was currently playing? My only explanation was that he must have heard me talking about it out in the hallway as I was leaving with my friend. Things started to get a little strange from here on out. Just beyond his door is a really nice sized patch of grass where I would take Cortana out to use the bathroom. She's usually a pretty mild-mannered dog, sniffing everything on the ground and never really bothering to look up whenever she's exploring and focusing on going to the bathroom. Cortana suddenly started to turn towards the window where the blinds had been closed all the way, and then started barking absolutely hysterically. I was really embarrassed about it. Since when did Cortana act like that? I would pull her and command her to hush, but to no avail. Every day that I went to that patch of grass in the afternoon, she would consistently bark to that window like a maniac. I eventually started taking her somewhere else to see if it would change, and it did. I went back after about a week and found out that the blinds were pulled all the way to the top. The window opened and Joe popped his torso all the way out, stretching his arms to the sky. My first initial thought was just, who does that? I say an awkward hello and then hurry Cortana along and back into our apartment. Someone begins to knock on my door like every other day. I become deadly quiet and tiptoe to the door to see that it's none other than Joe just standing there peering intently into the peephole. I don't open the door. It happens again about 3 more times, and every time the house becomes quiet. A little bit of time goes by and I then receive a text message from Joe offering to take me out to dinner. I'm absolutely perplexed, staring at the message and not really knowing what to say back. Not even 3 minutes go by and he sends another message.
You know, I'm just trying to be friendly after you ditched me last time. Sorry for being friendly.
I should have taken a picture of my face at the time because the shock must have been so great that Cortana sat up just to stare at me. Let me be very clear. I'm kind of a busy woman. I have a lot going on in my life. I don't usually text people back immediately, like ever. I was pretty freaked out by that point and decided to call my mom and tell her what happened. I felt really unsafe in my own home at that point, and I honestly really didn't know what to do. What if this dude decides to try and break into my apartment and attack me, and all because I supposedly ditched him and felt too sick to go to an escape the room event? My mom said to let him know very firmly that my husband wouldn't appreciate me having dinner with another man, and that his behavior was really inappropriate. For some reason, it took me mentioning my husband for Joe to back off, not me ignoring him or avoiding him or practically running to my car whenever I heard his door open. Even after that, Cortana would still turn to the window and growl. I eventually moved out of that apartment and never heard from Joe ever again after that. And let's keep it that way. I live in a small studio apartment. I like my place a lot, even though it has some details that always made me really nervous living here. The wall facing the street is basically just a giant window, and I also live on the 2nd floor, so my window is very close to the streets below. The marquee looks very easily climbable and gives direct access to my window. Even though that makes me a little uncomfortable, nothing really ever happened, and it just stopped bothering me a couple of months after I moved in. That is, until last week. Last Monday, I woke up at around 2 a.m. to go get some water to drink. Since the kitchen is right next to the side of my front door, I could hear something coming from the corridor as I filled up a cup. It wasn't coming from another apartment or from the streets. The noise had that very specific reverberation from an empty corridor. I approached the door and could make out that the sound was actually some kind of trap beat playing on repeat. At first, I thought maybe that was just some drunk guy messing around with his phone before getting to his apartment, but after laying in bed again, I could still faintly hear the same beat coming from the corridor. It kept playing and playing until I fell asleep about an hour later. 7 a.m. rolls around and I'm woken up by someone ringing the doorbell. It was a cop. A bunch of them, actually. The landlord and some of my neighbors were also there. Even with the place really crowded, it was really hard to miss the trail of blood that went from the corridor window to the far end of the wall. The cops said that someone was leaving for work early in the morning when they came across the blood smears and then immediately called the police. He questioned me and the neighbors. The place was scrubbed and we went on with our lives, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every single day I always come home and walk over where the blood was, and I always wonder what the heck happened in the corridor that night. Now, I was a little bit uncomfortable living here before, but now I'm definitely really spooked out. I wonder if I'll ever figure out what happened. When I was in college, I lived in apartments that weren't on campus but still called student housing. I saw this guy around that I thought was pretty cute. His name was Kiefer. He knocked on my door one day and he said he was the maintenance man and that he needed to change our AC filters. I was making dinner for my roommate at the time and for myself, and he commented that it smelled really good, so I invited him in to stay for dinner. All went pretty normal as we watched a movie afterwards. Totally innocent. At about midnight or so, I kept telling him that I was really tired, trying to hint for him to leave. My roommate had already gone to bed, so it was just him and me now. After telling him to leave because I was going to bed, he kept trying to talk me out of it, saying that I should stay up longer. He just kept taking forever, trying to drag it out. When he was putting on his shoes, he then started crying that he had a cramp in both of his calves. He told me that he couldn't walk upstairs and that he didn't know what to do. I really wanted to go knock on his door to have his roommate come and get him, but I'm in a wheelchair and I couldn't go upstairs. We had an extra bedroom in our apartment that only had a bed in it and nothing else. He continued asking if he could sleep in the room and I kept telling him no. We argued for like 10 minutes about allowing him to sleep in the extra bedroom. I was so freaking exhausted, I just went ahead and decided to let him. I locked my roommate's door and my door so that he at least couldn't come into our rooms. When I woke up the next morning, luckily he was gone and nothing was stolen. I honestly should have reported it to the apartment complex, but I wasn't really thinking. A couple of days later, I heard someone knock on my bedroom window in the middle of the night, and I totally flipped out about it. It ended up being Kiefer, but obviously I didn't let him in. Then the next night, my roommate and I were in the living room, and then he came and knocked on our door. Ashley, my roommate, answered it, and he asked for me, and she said that I was asleep already. His response?
No, I know she's not asleep. I looked inside y'all's window, so I know she's awake.
Yeah, Kiefer was definitely a creep. So, for some backstory, I moved from a very small town to a relatively large city. It was for university, and I was around 19 years old. Since I wouldn't be in the new city until around September, my soon-to-be roommate decided to look for a place for us to live in the fall. In mid-July, she finally found us a decently priced, newly renovated, close to everything apartment. It was on a pretty busy road in the city. Fast forward to September when it was time for me to move in. Myself and my parents get to the building, and it looks a bit disheveled from the front, and upon entering, the inside of the building was an absolute mess. Appliances in the hallways, plaster was running up and down the walls like a child had been given the material to play with, and the flooring was missing in most places. Since the apartment was actually kind of nice, and since it was my first ever apartment away from home, I was absolutely thrilled to finally have a place of my own. Now, this apartment housed many students, as well as the landlord and the superintendent, so it seemed like a relatively safe place to live, right? Wrong. My roommate had the door buzzer hooked up to her phone so that when someone rang, her phone would ring and she had the option to let them in or not. About a week after school had started, I was home since I didn't really have class until later in the day, and my roommate was at work. She texted me to let me know that someone had tried to buzz into the apartment, and when she answered, all she heard on the other end was an unfamiliar voice practically screaming,
"Let me in! Let me in right now!"
Luckily, my roommate had the sense enough not to let them into the building. About 10 minutes later, someone comes banging right on my door. Without saying anything, they just continued knocking for what felt like hours, although it was probably only about 20 minutes in reality. I stayed in my room the entire time with the door closed because I was absolutely so afraid of who might be standing outside my door. Eventually, the knocking stopped, and when I checked the people, the person was gone. I felt really relieved that I had avoided what seemed to be some kind of creep looking to get in my apartment for some reason that I really wasn't aware of. Nothing too strange happened again until about 2 weeks later. Again, I was home since I was sick and my roommate was at work. I should note that my roommate was a flight attendant for a small airline, and obviously she wouldn't have her phone if she was already in the air. As I recall, there was no one to buzz the door this time. So it's early morning and not too long after my roommate left for work, and someone came banging on my door. Of course, I didn't get up to answer it because I was still sick in bed, hoping that they would just go away. We weren't expecting anyone, no packages or friends. And besides, how would they get into the apartment if my roommate's phone didn't ring for the door buzzer? When I finally think whoever was knocking at the door has left, someone actually unlocks the door to my apartment and walks right in. I was mortified. I always sleep with my room door closed, so there was absolutely no way that they would have known someone was in there except by opening the door. Since my roommate was a flight attendant, I knew it wasn't her because her flight would have been gone by this time, so there was really no way she could even answer her phone since there's no service when they're up in the air. I was frantically texting her to let her know that someone was indeed in our apartment without our permission. Where we live, our landlord must give 24 hours notice before entering the property. As I lay in bed crying and shaking out of pure fear, the person seemed to have just walked around the living room area and then left again. As soon as I heard the front door shut, I ran and locked all of the locks and put across the chain that would keep anyone from getting in, even if they had a key. To this day, neither me or my roommate know if it was the same person or someone who had previously lived in the apartment. We have no idea who it could have been. We left that apartment building only a couple months after that and moved into a more friendly and seemingly safer neighborhood. Whenever I drive past that building now, I always get the creeps. I don't think that I'll ever forget what happened. I went to university in London for about 3 years, and this happened in my final semester early on in 2018. The area that I lived in wasn't that great, to say the least. There were daily issues with catcalling, creepers taking photos of female students on their way to nights out on the weekends, and this wasn't even the first time that I'd been followed. It was just the worst. Often I would tell classmates stories about a creep that I encountered that day, and they'd ask what area I was staying in, and when I told them, they'd go, "Ah, yeah, that's why I don't go there." I should also mention first that I have pretty bad anxiety disorder, and this day I nearly didn't go into university at all because I just had a really bad feeling. But if I listened to every single bad feeling I got, I'd probably never leave the house. So I shrugged it off and decided to make myself go to class anyway. My anxiety is so bad at times that it's hard for me to differentiate between a genuinely bad feeling and my brain going into fight or flight mode, for literally no dang reason. Knowing the issues of the area I lived in, I purposely dressed down as much as possible to minimize attention from creepers because I was in no state to deal with it that day. My typical look ventures into alternative style. Lots of black tattoos and dark makeup. You know, the works, which tends to get attention in itself, so on this day I purposely just wore jeans, a massively baggy shirt, and little to no makeup. I figured this would be enough for people to overlook me and just let me go about my day more or less ignored. Well, I was wrong. A piece of information that's really relevant to this is that there was a note emailed to all of the residents of my apartment block around this time. Apparently, a man had recently attempted to assault a handful of girls from both our apartment block and another student hall apartment block around 10 minutes away. It also included a description of the man. Not even 5 minutes after leaving my apartment block, there's some guy following me. Now at first, alarm bells really didn't ring yet. It's pretty common for strangers to approach you in London, usually trying to sell something to you or just generally get money off of you in some way or another. So I hear this guy start calling after me.
Hey, excuse me.
But I keep my head down and flat out ignore him, which is usually enough to put off anybody trying to sell you something. Well, when he then starts following me down the street and across the road, I knew this was a bit more sinister now. He's getting progressively more frustrated the more that I ignore him. His excuse me's becoming more insistent and eventually turning into,
"Oh, come on, I'm just trying to talk to you."
At this point, my heart is already racing like crazy. But I'm a big fan of true crime and I like to think I know the basics of trying to keep myself safe. Specifically when it comes to not falling into the trap of being polite, even when somebody's making you uncomfortable. And just after I cross the road with this guy still following me, I come into a series of small shops. They're not so small as to not have any security. Just the kind of place the people working in the area would stop by to grab their lunch for the day, and so on. Thinking of both the security guard and the security cameras, I walk straight into the shop, hoping that this would be enough to put the creeper off. Well, it's not. I go into the first aisle and pull my phone out, texting my dad to call me immediately. There's not much he can really do as he lives across the country, but I figured that maybe even seeing me on the phone will put him off, or that maybe I could say something like, "So you'll be here in 5 minutes? Okay, great." Hell, I mean, worst case scenario, I figured if something happened, I at least had some form of witness on the phone. My dad, knowing of the problems that I've had with creepers in the area, calls me immediately. We have a code for if I'm being followed so that I can tell him without being too conspicuous about it. But I'm way too panicked to care about being subtle. The creeper is now standing a couple of feet down the aisle, pretending to look at things but mostly just staring at me. All the while he had his hood up, obscuring most of his face, which made me really uneasy. It was as if he was just as aware of the security cameras as I was. He matched parts of the description of the man that we'd been emailed about, but it was really hard to tell with his hood up, and he was also wearing a really thick pair of sunglasses which hadn't been mentioned in the description. As they were the most noticeable thing about him to me, I wasn't really sure if it was the same guy. When he realizes what I'm doing, he then disappears from the aisle, but I'm cautious and stay standing where I am. I was shaking and pretending to be fascinated by the bottle of Pepsi that was in my hand, all the while my dad tries to juggle comforting me, asking me questions, and giving me advice on what to do. Not even a full minute passes by before suddenly the creeper then reappears, and with a box of donuts in his hands. I turn to him and snap a "What?" doing my best to make it clear that I have absolutely no patience for him. He proceeds to ask me if he can borrow 20 pounds for the donuts. I give him an annoyed look and reply with an impatient no, doing really all that I can to try to make my 5'3" self appear at least somewhat intimidating. He does his best to appear hurt and offended, giving a
"Oh, sorry I bothered you,"
before putting down the donuts and then walking away in the general direction of the exit. Again, I'm not convinced. I stand in that aisle for a little while longer, telling my dad what had just happened and then move over into the next one, slowly scouting out the entire shop for any sign of him. I'm standing in the third aisle now when he then reappears yet again, slowly edging his way towards me. There's only one other person in the aisle, a shop employee that was stacking shelves, and I'm mustering up the courage to approach the worker and try to explain my problem, when the creeper tries to talk to me yet again. Putting all of my adrenaline to use, I spin to face him and then snap out a "What? What do you want from me?" Keeping in mind all of the anti-creeper advice that I'd seen online about making it obvious that you would not want to be an easy victim in the slightest. And he seemed surprised by this, before mumbling out something along the lines of,
"I was just wondering if,
but I honestly couldn't make out exactly what he was trying to say over the sound of my damn heartbeat. To which he then returns to his shocked and offended act, then saying,
"God, okay, I was just trying to be nice here."
Which I responded with, "Well, don't." And then he storms back down the aisle. I walked through the shop another 3 or 4 times to make sure he was really gone this time. All the while still on the phone with my dad before I finally check out and then peek out of the shop entrance. He's still hanging around and I have to choose a moment where he seems distracted by something so that I could haul my ass out of there immediately. I really needed to get towards the tube station. At this point, I was an absolute nervous wreck, and the only reason I didn't go straight back home was that I was absolutely scared that he would follow me. The entrance to my apartment block was in what can only be described as an alleyway. It was a spruced up alleyway which often had fellow students or workers from the area on their smoke break, but it was significantly quieter than the route to the tube station. I figured I'd just continue on my way to university, which would at least get me out of the neighborhood for a few hours. Plus, it also gave me the chance to see my friends and get some in-person comfort over what had just happened. My dad stayed on the phone with me right up until I was on my train, and I was looking over my shoulder the entire time, expecting to see the creeper follow me again. Now, I can see how this might have sounded like my anxiety blowing things out of proportion if this was my last encounter with the creep, but it wasn't. The following week on the day of that same class was canceled, so I spent the day in my flat, generally being just an antisocial hermit. The week after, however, same day of the week, same time of the day, I was leaving again to go to class, certain that the encounter 2 weeks ago was just another charming story to add to my collection of gross encounters from the area, when not even 5 feet from the door of the apartment building, somebody falls into step with me. It's really not too unusual. With other students in the building, I figured it's just somebody who had a class at the same time as mine making their own way to the tube station. And that's when I hear,
"Hey, do you remember me?"
I look up and I can't even manage to keep the dread from my face when I then see the creeper from 2 weeks ago. Right away, I tell him to go away, remembering how it worked the last time, but not this time. This time he doesn't even attempt his shocked, offended act that he played in the shop, and instead even seems amused by this. He instead then says, "I'm just walking this way too." So I halted my steps and just gesture forward, then saying, "Go on then," figuring if he's telling the truth he'll keep walking and continue on ahead of me. Well, he doesn't. Instead, he just stops and smiles. It was that same freaking amused, sinister smile as before. And then he says,
"Come on, why won't you talk to me?"
Which I then respond to with, "Just leave me alone already." But I'm getting more and more freaked out by this creep, and it doesn't come out anywhere near as harsh as I wanted it to. He then does that creepy smile yet again. At this point, I start walking again, knowing that when I turn the upcoming corner, we'll be facing a music venue, which pretty much always has either security or some kind of janitor right outside, figuring I can just go up to them and ask them for help if he doesn't leave me alone. He keeps trying to talk to me.
"Do you have a boyfriend?"
I'm tempted to say yes, hoping it'd get him to leave me alone, but I know that it'd more than likely just probably lead to even more questions. "How long have you been together? What's his name?" And probably just a bunch of other creepy invasive questions from there. This guy doesn't even care if I have a boyfriend or not. He's just trying to draw me into conversation. Every time he tries to swerve a little, so he's now walking parallel to me, just closer. I take a few steps away. I start to get more nervous and respond to that question with, "Oh, screw off." But he just keeps firing questions like,
"Why don't you talk to me? I just want to talk to you. Don't you like talking to people?"
But by now we're rounding the corner and I now spot a security officer. I immediately pick up my pace, going down a set of stairs that led towards nothing but the security guy, so that it's obvious what my intentions are. The creeper quickly says,
"I'll just leave you alone then. You clearly don't want to be friends."
He then disappears, and I speed walk down the street to the shop that he'd followed me the first time. It's only when I'm outside the shop that I decide to stop and look around. He's nowhere to be seen. If he really had just happened to be walking in the same direction, I would have still been able to see him because there's literally nowhere else to go from where I was walking. which meant for me to not be able to see him, he'd have to have done a U-turn and started walking in a completely different direction altogether. After much pleading from my family and friends, who were really worried that this creep would show up again the following week since this was 2 separate occasions on the same time at the same day, I went to the reception staff at my student halls. I told them about the incident and they put me in touch with the police to make a report about it since they thought it was the guy who we'd been emailed about. The police were, well, nowhere near as helpful. In fact, they didn't even get back in touch with me after I emailed them an entire account of what happened. The following week, my dad drove down from across the UK to walk me to class with no sighting of the creeper, and for the rest of the semester I left over an hour earlier than usual for that class and just hung around campus to waste time. The silver lining was that this whole thing really made me appreciate my family because they ended up memorizing my entire schedule, always making sure that I had a relative available to stay on the phone with me from the moment I stepped out of the flat to the moment that I was on my train and vice versa. I honestly thought that was the end of the entire thing, until a few months later. I was now graduated and moved back to my hometown when I then get a text from my best friend. It's a link to a news article about some pervert who had been in court for assaulting students in my area, and with the article she then sent a text that read, "So is this the guy who was following you?" The article had a photo of the man that it was about, and it was indeed the creeper that had been following me that whole time. And it was also the one we'd been warned about via email. He didn't have the glasses on that he'd had when he was following me, which made me think it was some kind of disguise, seeing as he was apparently already banned from being near any student halls at the time that he'd been harassing me. The article explained how the creep had started following other girls from the exact same spot that he started following me, only they did what I didn't. They were polite. Of course, I'm absolutely not blaming them for that. I was just really fortunate to have it drummed into me by a protective dad and an equally overprotective older brother. Screw politeness. It's better to be accidentally rude to somebody with good intentions than to give the benefit of the doubt to an absolute psycho. So when he plied them with question after question and they'd warily answered, he'd always ask them,
"Where are you going?"
and whatever they responded with, he'd then tell them,
"No, you're coming with me,"
and make a grab for them, assaulting some of them. And you want to know the worst part of all this? He got no jail time. He was given a curfew demanding that he'd be home before 6 a.m. and after 6 p.m. And I'd also like to add that in the same article, the police officer who hadn't been fit to bother calling me back about my report actually congratulated himself and his team for how well they handled the whole thing. What a load of crap. I'm still really working through severe anxiety issues, especially when it comes to being out in public alone. I'm never living in that city again. In Michigan, there's a little place called Traverse City. It's a smallish, very esoteric hippie kind of town. In this town, there's a bona fide abandoned mental institution, complete with an absolutely enormous deserted grounds and dilapidated buildings, an old rusty water tower, and a huge stone basin in the middle of the woods that could hold maybe about 50 people. You know, the works. This actually isn't the creepy part, believe it or not, as nothing scary really happened there. It was actually quite the popular hangout for college kids to get stoned and whatnot. It's more of a small detail on just how strange this town is, and kind of a backstory. You see, when the mental ward shut down, the patients were basically let loose to their own devices, and many of them ended up as one of the many homeless people that just roamed the town. And some of them just ended up in the Whiting. The Whiting was the cheapest apartment in town, basically a month-to-month hotel. It really wasn't a bad place. There was a housekeeper that stopped by once a week to clean the place up. It wasn't falling apart or infested with pests or anything. It was technically a sort of halfway home years and years ago, and it had to be shut down when some man was found dead of heroin overdose on the front steps. It eventually reopened to the public again, and some of the people who lived there previously had nowhere else to go and moved back in. At this point of the story, I was a really broke college kid. I got some really weird vibes from the place, but I was really short on money, and I thought it would be an interesting experience to say the least. Well, I wasn't wrong. First of all, it looked like the architect had actually gleaned inspiration from The Shining. Long, narrow hallways, some straight and some swooping around. Some that started out normal and then got so narrow that you literally had to walk sideways to fit. There was painted over doors and doors that led to nowhere, and tiny doll-sized doors in the hallway that never opened. There were a lot of creepy pictures of crying girls or off-putting abstract paintings decorating the walls. My friend lived in a small room that had a large mysterious X painted over his bed. He also had a painted over locked door to his left. And my other friend who lived on the second story at the end of the building had a window that looked out of a straight up brick wall. Pretty bizarre, right? Well, wait until you meet your neighbors. Schizophrenics and drugged out zombies wandered up and down the halls or peeked out of their doors before slamming it shut. You could just be walking along when the door would suddenly open and a battered looking woman would tell you that the other tenants were trying to hurt her and that she was going to be sleeping with a knife for protection. Another good friend of mine once opened her door and found an entire lamp taken apart piece by piece and then aligned on her doorstep. There's a few incidents that really stick out in my mind. Once I went to the shattered kitchen to make myself lasagna. One of the women was already there and she was sitting in a kitchen chair just talking to herself in a high-pitched girly voice. Now, this woman was a big and rather imposing individual, made all the more intimidating because she had a habit of ramming people in the shoulder whenever she passed them in the halls. She's just sitting there and mocking and insulting me the entire time, but all to herself as if I can't hear her, all while eyeing me with a sideways, dead-eyed kind of look. Every now and then she gives a high-pitched giggle that sounded truly sinister. Well, I then say, everything all right? And she's muttering to herself, "The thing's talking to me." I won't respond. And then she giggles. I'm definitely perplexed at this point. I pick up a fork and I'm getting ready to exit, and she then starts really flipping out and starts rapidly saying, "You got a fork? You gonna kill me with that? You gonna stab me in the throat and murder my family with that fork?" Yes, she was actually screaming by the end of it. I didn't stick around. I could still hear her screaming whenever I would take my crap out of the door, going on about hurting her. And just like some movie, I can hear high-pitched hysterical laughter echoing down the halls as she gets louder and louder. Truly brought goosebumps up to my arms, I can tell you that. Another time, a man was so messed up on some substances that he could hardly stand, and he tried to chase me. He was at the foot of the stairs and I had to pass him, and he tried to slur some nonsense at me while I walked by him. I think he said something about a shower. Well, he reaches out and grabs my arm and then tries pulling me toward him. I pull away so fast that he gets knocked over, and as I'm running up the stairs, he's trying to collect himself and stand back up. I hide in my friend's room and we can hear him slouching and banging up the stairs, just calling for me in a doped up sort of way. About a week later, he apparently forgets about it and I see him in the lobby. He had asked me which room I lived in. So yeah, that's a brief summary of the really creepy place that I lived in at one point. It was definitely an interesting and creepy experience, to say the least. A couple of months ago, my sister started talking to this boy online named Ben. The two of them had a lot in common and were only about a year apart in terms of their ages. We didn't really think anything of it at first because it's kind of just normal to have online friends these days. My sister is pretty introverted, so it was really nice to hear that she had someone she could chat to. From what I understand, Ben was also there for her emotionally as well, if that makes any sense. My sister became quite attached to him really quickly. Ben had also introduced her to a few of his friends as well. They all just seemed like your typical edgy teenagers, the kind that post selfies with emo song lyrics and stuff like that. Ben really seemed like just a normal, caring friend. He even messaged me a couple of times whenever he was concerned about my sister being upset about something. He seemed genuine, and I was really happy that my sister had found someone like this. One day, my sister had asked my mom if she could meet up with Ben in the city. He lived in another state and had organized to spend a week in our state with his aunt, so it seemed like the perfect opportunity for the two of them to meet up. They arranged a date and time to meet in the city, and my mom and I accompanied her. When the day finally came though, he didn't even show up. He made some kind of excuse that his aunt wasn't going to drive him there, and we figured that she was probably just concerned about Ben meeting someone that he only knows over the internet. I'll be honest, I really did have a really bad feeling about their meetup while we were waiting for Ben to show up, but I just stupidly ignored it. My sister, understandably, was quite upset that he hadn't shown up. Ben sent me a message apologizing to us for having to run around after him. He went on to explain that sometimes his aunt can just be really unreasonable. At the time, I genuinely believed that he was a decent person and that he wasn't lying about his situation. A couple of months passed with just the two of them chatting away like normal. At some point, my mom gets the idea that she and my sister could just fly to his state and meet him. Ben really seemed to like that idea, so they ordered the flight tickets. One day out of the blue, my sister then burst into my room, clearly very frightened. She told me to block Ben right away, as well as the two friends that he'd introduced me to. When I asked why, she explained to me that Ben had been a cover-up identity for a person that had previously threatened her using another account. Every single one of the pictures that he posted were literally from someone else's account. She found all of this out when she decided to confront him. Apparently, his two so-called friends were all fake accounts run by him in order to keep up the illusion. Whoever this person was, after being confronted by my sister, actually admitted that they were keeping tabs on her. They had been chatting for months, and she had likely told him a lot of personal things as well. After my mom found out, all of the flights were immediately canceled, and we were all pretty spooked about the whole thing. We couldn't really tell the police because my sister was a dingus, and she didn't keep a copy of all of the messages that the account had sent to her. We actually managed to contact the guy whose pictures were stolen and told him about the whole incident, and the account was taken down shortly afterwards. So to whomever Ben really is, let's just never cross paths ever again, and stay the hell away from my sister. This story happened almost 10 years ago. I got home from work one day and logged into Facebook to find a message from someone that I didn't know. It was too long ago to remember verbatim what was said, but it was along the lines of, "Hey, I know you have no idea who I am, but I've been trying to decide on what to do for a few days, and I figured I'd let you know what's been going on. Someone's been catfishing me using your identity for over 2 years, and I just found out about it last week." The sender of the email was clearly pretty shaken up and, understandably, was experiencing a big mix of emotions. According to her, she had met the imposter online a little over 2 years ago prior to writing this, and apparently they had been engaged in a pretty intimate long-distance relationship for a majority of that time. The imposter had created a Facebook and had over time reposted almost all of my photos with their own captions to them, including a good amount of art that I'd drawn that they also took credit for. They created fake profiles for a good amount of my close family and friends as well, and they would even comment on the photos to make the photos seem more legit. The funniest part to me though is that although most things in my real life seem to be mirrored in this fake profile, I, a straight male, was instead portrayed as trans. I think the main reason for this was that the sender of the email and the imposter would actually speak on the phone, and the imposter turned out to be a female in the end, and therefore needed a reason to justify her more feminine sounding voice. The sender of the email was justifiably both angry and creeped out and wanted to find the catfish. She started asking me a lot of questions about my life, but phrasing them like, "Is your sister's name so-and-so, and did you go to this high school?" Some of them were clearly information that anyone could glean from a quick browse on my profile, but then she asked me, "Is your best friend so-and-so?" Which struck me as odd since despite this person actually being my closest friend and who I spend the most of my time with, we've barely had any Facebook photos together, and most are from a really long time ago. Then she asked, "Were you adopted and are your half-siblings named so-and-so?" Which totally sealed the deal for me since I know for a fact that I'd never posted about being adopted online before. The sender of the email already had an idea that this person had known me in real life, but this confirmed it for me. The sender of the email had contacted me shortly after confronting the imposter for the very first time. I guess after about 2 years, they'd finally become suspicious of the fact that the imposter wouldn't show their face. I honestly have no idea how it took this long for them to figure out that they were being played, but I'm glad they finally decided to give the ultimatum of, show your face or I'm cutting you off. I'm pretty sure this is the point where the imposter admitted to being a catfish and that she'd been using the identity of someone that she had a crush on in high school before hanging up. I was given the URL so that I could look through the profile myself, which happened to be up for about 2 days after I saw it before it was all removed. It was definitely really bizarre. The imposter had posted more than I ever had on Facebook, and it genuinely seemed like they lived a pretty involved double life online as me. Just about everyone I'd posted photos with on my real profile would then have their own fake profiles created that had enough content to be genuinely convincing so that they could be tagged in and then validate these new photos. Some of these fake profiles seemed to have gone and made their own so-called friends as well, and I really wondered if any of those were used to facilitate even more online dating deception. Either way, the amount of time that this person had spent fabricating their alter ego's online presence was pretty shocking to me. The whole time that I'd been crawling down this Facebook rabbit hole, the sender of the email was actually looking through my real profile. After some time passed, she sent me a message saying, "Did you take these photographs?" and showed me what I remember as a black and white photo of a barn or something. I hadn't, which was pretty weird since everything else on the fake profile actually originated with me, and she'd noticed the discrepancy. We both tried reverse image searching, but with no luck. Then, either through a stroke of genius or somewhat suspiciously, I couldn't really tell, she thought to flip the fake number that the imposter had gave her into the fake Facebook profile around in reverse. A Google search came up with a landline that belonged to the home address of a girl that I'd gone to high school with. I couldn't believe it. Real me was actually Facebook friends with the real imposter's profile, so we both went snooping around and found the photo that she'd claimed that I'd taken. This pretty much confirmed to me that this was the imposter. I'm pretty sure there were more indicators to the sender as well, but I can't really remember. I thought about messaging her for a really long time, but decided that it probably wouldn't lead to anything good. At the time, my thoughts were definitely let's not meet. I asked a few times with the sender of the email just to try and decompress a bit, but honestly, I just wanted to distance myself from the whole situation, and also had my suspicions about the sender as well. I figured maybe it was the imposter's one last ditch effort to try and talk to me. Although when it was all over, the sender seemed to be eager to leave this all behind as well, so maybe not. Either way, it was a really strange experience. I felt mostly freaked out and violated, but I guess there was a small part of me that was really flattered by it. I had a lot of mixed emotions. The weirdest part to me is that I'm really an approachable person and would have definitely been willing to talk to and probably be friends if this person had just approached me instead. Although I'm still not too sure if this was done out of an obsession for me, or if this person felt like I was just a suitable image to base this fabricated persona off of. I remember talking to her probably about twice throughout high school, and really didn't have a very good idea of who she was other than a quiet hipster girl. If either person involved ever happens to read this, I'd definitely be happy to talk now. It's been years, but I've gone from being very put off to always wondering why this person chose me over countless other more attractive or interesting people online to base their other life off of. According to the sender who contacted me, she'd probably spent more time online pretending to be me than she actually did going about her own life. I have a tumultuous history of addiction and have had plenty of my own escapes, which is why it's always fascinated me that someone would want to pretend to live someone else's life as a means of doing that. Because at the end of the day, the person pretending to be me really had no idea that I spent my own time daydreaming of being a different person as well. I guess it just shows you that no matter how much you wish you were someone else, chances are that person probably has plenty of their own reasons to want to escape their demons as well. So I have a bit of an update to all this. For anyone still interested, I recently spoke to a really good friend of mine who told me that while they don't know the perpetrator personally, they do know that they identify as non-binary now. which to me sort of confirms my suspected motive, which was to explore their own sexuality through another identity to one degree to another. But I'll probably never really know for sure. So I had a best friend in high school named Lena. We were friends for about a year and a half, and we would spend almost every weekend at her house, listening to music, watching scary movies, and gossiping. She was a little bit crazy. The kind of girl that would beat up all of her boyfriend's exes unprovoked and catfish people. I say we were best friends, but actually it was more like I looked up to her and she liked that since she could boss me around and hang out with me whenever she pleased. She was extremely manipulative and two-faced. She had a hobby of being nice to girls at school and then going on their social media and making fun of everything they posted. She would befriend people just to get information from them. When we were friends, Lena was dating this guy named Nolan. They dated for about a year and a half and had lots of troubles the last 6 months or so. He wouldn't ever go out drinking most weekends, and she would always cry in the middle of the night and blow up his phone, always yelling at him and making him feel guilty. She was borderline psychotic whenever it came to his exes or the girls he was friends with, and they just weren't really working out, but they stayed together anyway. At some point, Nolan got Lena pregnant, and one of Lena's other friends, whose name was Autumn, became pregnant at the same time from the guy that I was in love with. Naturally, I really wanted nothing to do with Autumn, but because they were pregnant together, Lena started hanging out with Autumn most weekends and totally neglected our friendship. After about a month, I became really fed up with it and just started ghosting her. At first, she tried to apologize about it, but I was not having it. I was really jealous and childish about the whole thing. So eventually Lena got pissed at me and just stopped trying altogether. A couple of months went by and Lena had the baby. Nolan and Lena stayed together to take care of their son, but their relationship was absolutely horrendous at that point. Lena cheated on him and Nolan decided he wanted out of the relationship but continued to see his son and buy things for him. However, Lena and Lena's mother made things very difficult for him by constantly changing the days that he could see his son, and also refusing to let him take his son anywhere besides Lena's house. Lena's mother would also throw out Christmas presents from Nolan, ignore his phone calls, and eventually even told him that he wasn't allowed at the house. Nolan begged for months to see his son, but it was pretty clear Lena and her mother didn't want him in the picture. Nolan even offered to pay child support, but they didn't want that either. They just wanted him gone. So he stopped trying. And apparently even that wasn't what they wanted. Lena took to social media to talk about how Nolan was a total deadbeat. She told everyone that she knew that being a single mother was really hard and that the baby daddy refused to take care of his child. About a year after they broke up, I met Nolan in person. We had been talking online for a couple of months about Lena. We had shared some stories about her crazy meltdowns and all of her manipulative tendencies, and we talked about the time when he came to her house while I was there, and he attempted to scare her by jumping out when she went out the front door, but instead accidentally jumped out at me. He thought it was the funniest thing ever that my face stayed stone cold, and I just said, "Sup." We had a similar sense of humor, and at the time, I really had no one. I had just come out of one of the worst depressive episodes of my life. It had lasted for a good year, and I had dropped out of school, been doing drugs, and isolating myself for weeks at a time, and even considering suicide. He was the one to help bring me back from the brink. He was really kind, and he was my support system. We were really just friends at first. When Lena caught wind of our friendship, she reached out to me. At this point, we hadn't really been friends for about a year and a half. We caught up and talked about what had been happening in our lives. She asked what was going on with Nolan, and I told her we were just friends, and everything seemed fine. That's when her erratic behavior then started up again. She would randomly block me on social media and then unblock me about a month or two later. Sometimes we would talk like, "Hey, how are you? Everything good?" And then the next day I'm blocked. At one point I even asked one of her friends to get her to tell me why she was doing it because I was just totally confused about it. So she unblocked me and told me she was salty about the situation with Nolan and the fact that I was being so friendly with him. I asked her why she kept making up with me and then suddenly getting pissed off again and cutting me off. I told her that I was really tired of thinking things were good only for her to turn around and pretend like we had never said anything to each other. That's when she told me that she can block me or unblock me whenever she wanted, and that I had done her really wrong by abandoning her during her pregnancy and befriending her ex-boyfriend. So then I tried to explain to her why Nolan was my friend. I tried to tell her that Nolan was all I had in the darkest time of my life. I tried to tell her why her neglecting me for Autumn really hurt my feelings, but she wasn't having it. I understand where she was coming from. I mean, I do, and I acknowledge the fact that I acted childishly and in a really cruel way, but I had tried to make up with her multiple times. I tried really hard, and she couldn't even stick with whether she wanted to forgive me or not. So I told her to just go ahead and block me again and be done with it. She told me that she wouldn't block me again, and then she gave me her blessing with Nolan. She said that she was fine if we wanted to date and said that she hoped I had a good life, and I said the same to her, and I really meant it. We had a bad end, but I was glad we could at least wish each other well. It was a few months later that I last spoke to her that Nolan and I had started dating. I had waited so long because I was really worried about Lana, even though we weren't really friends anymore. But she had given me her blessing and she was dating someone new, so I just went with it. It was around this time that I had received a friend request from some girl on Facebook named Casey. Casey said she lived in a really big city in my state, and since we had mutual friends and I had once gone to school in that city, I assumed that we had gone to school together, and I just didn't remember her. She seemed like a real person. She claimed to work at Hooters and had made posts about how her work days went, had several pictures of the same girl, and had made frequent posts about her ex-boyfriend. I accepted the friend request and she messaged me telling me how pretty she thought I was. I thanked her and I told her to message me anytime that she wanted to chat. For the next few months, I was totally clueless. I went about my regular life, posting about the things me and Nolan did, getting my GED, hanging out with friends, visiting my mother, etc. Occasionally I would see some really strange posts on my timeline from Casey, but I didn't really think much about it because I had over 1,000 friends on Facebook and I rarely even saw them. They were mostly posts about how much she hated her baby daddy and how her line of work just really sucked. But there were two posts in particular that really caught my eye. One was of a post that seemed to be referencing something that I had posted the day before, and the other was of her saying, "We all know a dirty hoe named so-and-so," with my first name. So I decided to go to her profile and then click through months and months of her posts. Some were about her line of work, but everything else was related to me and Nolan. And I mean everything. There were posts of her complaining about her deadbeat baby daddy buying things for everyone but his kid. Posts about how sad she felt about the breakup. Posts about how she missed me and thought of me as a sister. Posts about how I stole her boyfriend, and a ton of other ones crap-talking me. She made fun of my hobbies, had directly referenced some of my posts, and talked about how much she hated me and that I'm a dirty hoe. And her later post even went so far as to put my initials or full first name in the post. She even had people in the comments egging her on and talking crap too, even though no one knew who she was talking about. But I did. She always mentioned things that only the two of us would know. She would always reference our past experiences. It was undoubtedly Lana, and I knew it. I messaged Casey and I told her that I knew it was Lana. She played dumb and told me that the initials were of another girl that she knew. When I looked up the name she gave me, not a single person on Facebook had that name. When I told her that, she just brushed over it and tried to get me to talk about Lana. So I decided to play along and talk hardcore crap about her. I lied about a lot of things in an attempt to get her to out herself. But in the end, all she did was send a screenshot of our conversation to Lena's account in an attempt to make it look like Casey was real and was trying to help Lena by showing her what kind of person I was. Casey then immediately deleted her account. She didn't block me, she deleted it. I had a friend and my dad check and neither of them could find her profile. So then another month went by and I actually found out she had reactivated the account. And because I can't block a deleted account, she was in my friends list again. And she also had access to my profile for who knows how many days. So I blocked her. She then sent me friend and follow requests on 3 other websites under the Casey name, which I also blocked. It was around that time that me and Nolan began to get a lot of friend requests from obviously fake accounts. We would report them and block them and try to pretend that she wasn't going insane, even though she clearly was. One of these fake accounts was extremely obvious because it had poked both me and Nolan on the same day at the same time. She was taunting us, I guess. I blocked that account too. Please be aware that at this time, Lena had married her boyfriend. She was actually doing all this while married to someone else. About a year later, I thought that it had stopped, and one day I went to the Casey account on my friend's Facebook because I wanted to see if she was still posting about me. Well, when I had scrolled down, I realized that I had missed a post the last time I saw her profile. This post was about Lena mocking the fact that my mother, yes, my birth mother, called her frequently to talk crap about me, and also give her information on me and Nolan. As it turns out, my mother and Lena went to the same college. And I guess my mother thought what better way to make friends than by helping someone stalk her daughter. She would always ask me about mine and Nolan's relationship pretty often. Well, now I know why. She always talked crap about Lena and would act like the perfect mother to my face. She didn't raise me, so I never really trusted her 100%. And for that reason, I never gave her my phone number, address, or any other information that I felt was private. Whenever my dog went missing, she tried to convince me to post my address on Facebook. She kept saying how important it was that people knew exactly where he went missing from. What a load of horse crap. Thank God I didn't, because I might have woken up to Lana punching my head in, or worse. For a while there, I was legitimately really paranoid. Every time I went to the store or went outside, I was always watching my surroundings very closely. Because if Lana was willing to beat the crap out of a girl Nolan had dated for 3 weeks unprovoked, what would she do to me if she saw me in public? Would she kill me? I had never met someone so obsessive. Let me just say, Lena was a horrible friend. She was manipulative, bossy, judgmental, rude, erratic, narcissistic, and let's not forget, totally two-faced. When I felt my first heartbreak, she spent all night talking crap about the guy, saying that I deserved better. Eventually, I talked crap with her to make myself feel better. And what does she do? She messages him on Facebook and tells him everything I said about him. She guilt-tripped me about having other friends. She convinced me to abandon one of my good friends just because she didn't approve of her. She would often ignore me whenever there were people around. If I complained about anyone, she would always tell that person what I said, even if she had said something worse about them. She would go through people's Facebooks and laugh at them and talk about how dorky they were, and not in a nice way. In a, this person is scum for being a bit dorky kind of way. She would always make me feel ridiculous for liking the things that I liked, and I never really felt like I could ever be myself around her. It absolutely amazes me just how many people Lana has manipulated. Even her poor husband probably doesn't know that she was a stalker. So yeah, there you have it. Lana cyberstalked me for 2 years, and if I had given my mother my address, it might have become actual stalking. She hasn't been trying to stalk me for a while now though. I cut my mother off and deleted all but 40 people off of my Facebook, and I made all of my social media accounts totally private to keep this from happening ever again. I'm really hoping that I won't ever hear from Lana ever again. The last obvious sign that I've gotten of her still trying to stalk me is from a fake account that had sent me a friend request about 3 months ago. An account that was a few months old had the same last name as my friend, and only liked 2 Facebook pages, one which was a grocery store page, and the other was mine. My obscure Facebook page. My page that has spaces in between the letters and Japanese letters in the name. My page that you either have to know the exact name or have a link to find. My page that I had already had to ban Lana and Casey from because both accounts also liked it. Sometimes I really wonder if Lana is even trying to be secretive, or if she's just stupid. At least her attempts are few and far between now, so I don't really consider her to be stalking me anymore. Anyways, if you happen to finish this, sorry for such a really long story. I was really young when all of this stuff happened, and I made some really dumb choices, so go easy on me. I know I'm not 100% faultless in this, and yes, me and Nolan are still together. We're actually celebrating our 4-year anniversary in a couple of months, and I couldn't be happier. So Lana, I really hope to never talk to you ever again, and I really hope eventually you stop stalking me for good. It's time to move on. I'd like to think that I have pretty decent instincts now when it comes to knowing who has bad intentions, but I wasn't always as cautious and observant as I am now. When I was in high school, I always felt so ugly. I had low self-esteem and anxiety, which was really more of a problem rather than my looks, so if anyone of the opposite sex gave me even a little attention, I would always start to like them. I was pretty innocent despite how desperate I was, having only kissed one boy, so when I was 17 years old and a college guy put interest into me, I immediately clung to him. I was on this app and I met this guy who lived about 7 hours away from my city. His name was Brandon and he was gorgeous. Blonde hair, muscular, blue eyes, the whole package. He played soccer for his university and he was 19 years old. Honestly, he wasn't my usual type. I really liked guys with darker hair and eyes. I still do, but he was really handsome and really kind. He would always shower me with compliments and talk to me all the time. I lived alone in an apartment with just my cats, so I would always get lonely or scared, and he always comforted me. A month into talking, he started asking me for pictures. Not ones of my face, but obviously nudes or bra pictures. Now, this was nearly about 6 years ago, and I didn't really have a good concept of stranger danger on the internet. I mean, smartphones had only been around for about 2 or 3 years at this point, at least in my school and age group. 17-year-old me who was so insecure wanted to make him happy because I couldn't believe that I had gotten a guy like him. I was ready to do anything he asked. I never sent naked pictures because I was way too insecure for that, but I would send pictures of me in my bra. He would always shower me with compliments, saying how sexy and beautiful I was, and I fell for every word. With time, I started to get upset though. I wanted to see him. I would always send him pictures whenever he asked, but he never sent me any. He would always show me body pictures of him with his shirt off or other things, but the pictures were always really bad quality. When I started getting too persistent, he would always promise that he would start calling me. For some reason, this really appeased me, and we'd talk many times a week. After a couple of months, he got increasingly more sexual with me, telling me what he wanted to do with me and how badly he wanted me. This made me really nervous since I had only ever kissed one boy, but it also made me a little excited as well. It felt really good to be wanted by someone that I had really grown to like. This was all during the first semester of my senior year of high school, and I was going to turn 18 the next semester in late January. As it got to Christmas time, he started to talk about coming to my city to maybe see me for my birthday. This had me really excited since I really wanted to see him in person so badly. We had first talked about me going to him, something that he had really insisted on, but I chickened out and said that I couldn't do the drive alone, which was an excuse. I really didn't want to go to an older guy's house and stay with him alone. My own house made me feel more safe. We planned on a weekend after my birthday, and everything seemed fine. But then one day in my choir class, my best friend, an exchange student from Germany, was talking with me about him. I was telling her about him and showing pictures, and she got very unsettled. Have you seen him on video? I told her no, and she gave me a really skeptical look. Something doesn't feel right about this. There's no way he's real. Not that you couldn't date someone like him, but he's just too perfect. She was very direct and blunt with me about it, something my other friends weren't. So I took her words deeply, and I'm so thankful I did. I immediately asked him for a picture of his face. He made up some kind of excuse about how he couldn't take a picture right then, so I then persisted asking about every day. Finally, my instincts were kicking in and I was getting scared. I told him that I wanted him to video call me. He said no. I fought him on it for hours one night, telling him that if he tells me the truth, I won't get mad. He refused. I put the name that he gave me into Facebook, determined to find him on my own if he wasn't going to give in. Nothing came up on him. I texted him telling him that I couldn't find his Facebook, and he gave in, giving me a completely different name, and then told me, "That's me." I remember just feeling really cold as I read that. I looked up the account, and everything he had told me was a total lie. His name, his face, his age, everything. He was about 25 years old, definitely not 19. I was terrified. I thought that I'd been talking to someone just 2 years older, which is legal in my state, but he was 8 years older. I immediately stopped texting him. That's when he started getting really obsessive. He would text me dozens of times a day and always call me over and over again. He would beg me to answer him and to give him a chance. Then he started threatening me to answer. He told me he had saved all of my pictures. He kept them all, and he told me that he would send all of them to my friends and family on Facebook, show everyone me in my bra, and show all of our messages talking about what he wanted to do to me sexually if we met. Looking back, all of that was much more damaging to him than me, but I was young and stupid and afraid. I hated my body so much, and I was absolutely terrified of people seeing it, so I started talking to him again. Much more reserved and cautious this time. The days inched closer to my birthday and the weekend we had planned. Our messages had become bland and short since I was trying to make him lose interest in me, but he never gave up. If I ever took too long to message, then he would threaten me again. My birthday fell on a Monday that year, and he sent me all kinds of messages. I don't even remember what I did that birthday. I didn't have many friends, and I've never liked to celebrate, so it was probably small. When Friday hit, I got a text from him that morning saying that he was driving to my city and that he would pick me up from school. I was absolutely terrified about this. I had lost a lot of my friends the semester before, so they obviously had no clue of my situation. Out of total desperation, I went to one of my guy friends who I hadn't talked to in a couple of months and spilled everything to him. He was a longtime friend, so he was really sympathetic, and he promised to follow me home that day. I went straight to my car, ignoring the mass amount of text that had said,
"Where are you? I'm here."
My friend drove behind me all the way to my apartment, which he had no clue I was living in, and he actually stayed with me while I cried for a while. I had turned off my phone, and my friend left later in the night. Brandon had no clue where I lived, but I was still really paranoid. What if he somehow found me? Only about 3 people knew where I lived. 4 now with my guy friend, and he didn't come in contact with any of them. When I finally turned my phone back on, he was threatening me yet again. I was so exhausted and fed up. I started spam texting him, yelling and venting. I told him how he stressed me out and what he was doing was wrong. I told him to send the pictures and that I didn't care anymore. I started to attack his character, telling him how no one could love him if he hides who he is, then treats people like crap when they catch him in a lie. Thankfully for me, he had enough care for me to take my words to heart. He apologized and he told me that he deleted all of the pictures. He swore to leave me alone as long as we can still talk every now and then as friends. I agreed even though I knew I was lying. I talked to him for about a month with short responses until he finally gave up. Even now at 22 years old, I still see his name appear sometimes. I blocked his number and deleted him off of everything. His name still shows up sometimes on my Instagram or Snapchat when he's trying to re-add me. He's the very reason why I don't give my name or picture out anymore. So Brandon, you lied and collected underage pictures of me and then threatened me with them. You're a terrible person. Don't contact me ever again.